Hey everyone, Phreak here. Welcome to my patch 8.3 rundown. As always, I will continue to try to do my best to keep the format good and not ramble for too long. 8.3 is going to be on the North American and European LCS for weeks 5 and 6, almost definitely. Don't see anything issues coming with that, but things can change, I suppose. As of this time of this recording, week 3 just happened, which was the first days that people played in 8.2. When I recorded this, the night before, LCK just started 8.2, and that was after 3 weeks of play already, so it seems like their week 4 and 5 are going to be on 8.2, which means their week 6 and 7 are going to be on this patch. So basically it's because pros are given at least 1 week to play on the patch, and based on when various leagues start their seasons, or rather start their weeks, sometimes that means it's very, very late, such as, again, LCK just started playing on it and the patch is coming out now. What this means is it's very much impossible. It is actually always impossible for the patch to react to the prior patch's pro play. Patches are always going to be at least 2 patches behind in terms of reacting to pro. Like, there was no way at all for Design to look at how 8.2 is played in pro and change site to an 8.3. It's impossible. So that's just something I want you guys to know looking forward, that occasionally you'll see things change what feels like slowly, and it's because it's literally impossible to react 1 patch at a time to pro play. So coming into this with 8.3, there's plenty of data for solo queue in 8.2 and plenty of data from pro in 8.1, and that's kind of the major reactions. One other thing I'm going to say is because it's a odd numbered patch, it's smaller changes. Generally speaking, it's individual champion changes, minor rune changes, nothing too crazy. As a result, I'm going to test myself and see if I can make this video go quickly. There's my 2-minute intro. Let's move on. Up first, Swain. Swain is coming out. Swain rework coming through. There's a bunch of stuff you can look at. I recommend you watch Champion Spotlight. I hear the guy who voices it's really good at his job, and you should totally watch it. And all that's wonderful. There's also a nice little thing where the designer and playtester on the champion went on Cutie Pie and Scara's stream for Beyond the Rift. That's pretty cool as well. So, hey, sweet stuff. All right, as for actual champion changes, Azir Q nerf. For context, Azir is the #1 mid laner in pro play across 8.1. But he's a 47% win rate solo queue champion. So Azir still does have a pretty substantial issue of being really good in the hands of experts and not being really good in the hands of general players. So that's unlucky. I think having a short rank 5 cooldown is still very valuable for that, because keeping your soldiers in position is actually an important skill. Ultimately, as far as math is concerned, here's the numbers on how much it gets cut. It's actually pretty rough. He's losing a lot of that in the early game, which is a lot of his early laning power, honestly. And this definitely has a meaningful impact on his power as far as pro play is concerned. That's basically the only real meaningful change. I guess his W autos now draw minion aggro, but I don't think that's a huge deal. I'm going to guess this change didn't do anything to anyone at 8.2. Almost no champions got any meaningful changes as far as their potency is concerned, so I don't expect this to mean very much for Azir either. Ultimately, I think he is still going to be obviously a great late game champion. He's still going to be completely viable in pro. He's probably still going to be a top 5 mid laner in pro play. Sadly, he's going to be even further below 47% win rate in solo queue, and such is life. Azir is hard to play, and I think people are kind of okay with that. Next up is Jarvan. Jarvan was the #2 jungler in pro play. He's also above 50% win rate in both solo queue and high elo and average elo solo queue. So really, he is definitely strong all across the board. 4 armor definitely does matter as far as the nerf is concerned. So here's the numbers here. Here's how much his armor got cut by. And again, the math on the far right side is his physical durability. Basically, how much health does he have against physical damage compared to before? And it's a 3 to 2% drop because that's how armor works. So yeah, to some degree this matters. He will take more damage in the jungle, approximately 3% more damage in the jungle. It's not going to be a huge difference. If pros want to keep playing Jarvan, they can. This is not a big enough change that it's going to suddenly remove Jarvan from pro play. It will drop him, let's say, 1 or 0.5% solo queue, meaning that Jarvan is still completely viable in general gameplay. Jarvan is a little bit under 50% in top lane, and he'll remain that way, obviously. In fact, it'll hurt him more. Well, it probably won't hurt him more in top lane than jungle, because jungle you're taking a lot of damage from physical, but yeah, I mean, still feels like a meaningful nerf. Okay, great. Next up is Jhin. Jhin definitely has been doing kind of poorly. When Aerie got nerfed and Mana Flow Ban got nerfed and he couldn't spam with his spells nearly as much, and his lethality nerfs came through, which I didn't feel like needed to be buffed in the first place, and that kind of conflated some stuff as well, but oh well. Jhin is a sub 50% win rate champion. He's not getting played really at all in pro play. He's been picked exactly once when I checked last week across all the major leagues, and he's like a 47-48% win rate champion, so definitely does deserve some level of buffs. Do want to point out that there are other AD carries getting nerfed, so I think he will rise a little bit just by the fact that Kog'Maw is going to be a weaker champion, but also he's a champion who has a combat keystone and doesn't really want to run Unsealed Spellbook, so that helps slightly, because he actually wants to run things like Aerie and Comet, and if other people are running Spellbook, they don't get pushed out of lane. Of other minor note, I guess we show the numbers here for how much the damage really is going up. He didn't seem to gain very much from the double relic shield metagame going away. It didn't matter that much for a poke champion being viable or not, so that didn't change too much here. But here's how much the damage changes on his R. Obviously, it only matters from level 11 and onwards because of how the scaling changes, right? Rank 1 of the ability is the same. And I also included his base stats here because R has a total AD ratio, and his passive also multiplies his AD. What ultimately this means, though, is that this buff, the percentage, is higher here than it's going to be in the real game, because as he buys more and more attack damage, more and more of the damage of the ability is carried by his attack damage ratio. A lot of the damage is carried by the attack damage ratio, so it's not really a 7 to 9% damage bump that it might look like. That's okay. Still, you know, kind of nice. He'll get some more damage. I think he'll stay sub 50 in solo queue. I think some pros will try to play him in scrims, but I don't see Jhin being a priority pick yet. Not without substantial metagame changes. Actually, it's funny. I think Jhin might get some play in Asia, specifically Korea, where Rengar and Kha'Zix are still incredibly common. I think CC AD carries are, and also by extension, not great at killing tanks AD carries, and Jhin is both, are better in metagames full of assassins, which right now is true in Korea. Where you're seeing Rengar and Kha'Zix very, very, very frequently. And yes, you're seeing some tanks, of course, but NA is very tank heavy, EU a little bit less so, and Korea much less so, from what I've seen. So Jhin actually might find some use in Asia. China, I think, can get some good use out of him too, and I don't actually watch LMS right now, so I don't know what they're playing like at all. Next up, nerfs to Katarina. Certainly, Katarina is not a champion that exists in pro play right now, but she is actually pretty freaking strong in solo queue. She's got a 53% win rate in high elo, and is still above 50% in mid rating as well. So definitely a strong champion for solo queue. And this is an interesting situation that we're in, where there are a lot of assassin-esque champions, Katarina being one of them, that are not only viable, but strong for even skilled players. Even skilled players in solo queue, but not in pro play. And I'm not sure if assassins will never work in pro again. That's probably not true, considering that we literally have Rengar and Kha'Zix running around in the jungle right now in the best region in the world. And also, we've had champions like LeBlanc be pro viable, so that's probably not the case. But I know a lot of people are clamoring that assassins aren't viable, which is ironic when, again, Rengar and Kha'Zix are running around a lot of the time. But they're not viable in mid lane, according to pro players. They scrim them and don't seem to be able to make them work, so we don't see assassins in pro play. Okay, well, unlucky, Katarina's not going to be in pro play, but that's okay. She was honestly very, very good in solo queue, so she's getting some nerfed. And by the way, the passive damage is whenever she picks up a dagger. That's how her passive works, when she picks up a dagger from her Q, from her W. Those are the only abilities that drop daggers, pretty sure. She picks it up and deals as much damage. Of course, this ability does have an attack damage and an ability power ratio. Those are not listed here, so in the real world, the value of this nerf goes down, but that's expected for any change to a base value here. And as we look at this, we see that we've got a somewhat meaningful nerf to her damage output overall, right? 9 to 16% off the base. And again, the farther you go down this rabbit hole towards the bottom here, the more the attack damage and ability power ratio can carry it. So it's not really as big of a change as you might think. Though still definitely meaningful. Losing 47 damage at max rank is meaningful, absolutely. Losing 7 damage at rank 1, still meaningful. So Katarina goes down. She will still not see pro play, and I'm actually pretty confident that she will still be above 50% win rate in high elo solo queue, and I think that's fine. Cat mains should still be good at cat. That's the big thing there. All right, next up is in my opinion, sledgehammer to Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw right now is the winningest or second winningest AD carry in solo queue. He's also the #1 pick ban AD carry or bot lane farm in pro play right now. Kog'Maw, I think, is absolutely deserving of nerfs. He's the best everywhere around. 54% win rate is way too good. This champion is dumb. So, absolutely. I want to point out, by the way, that much like the Jhin in this patch, Kog'Maw did not actually gain or lose from the Relic Shield, double Relic Shield stuff going away, which I really want to point out, I think is interesting, is, as I take a quick aside, in pro play it might matter because pros are really good at convincing themselves of things, but in solo queue, we got out of double Relic Shield, unkillable, invincible AD carry bot lane. Brand was viable, Zyra was viable, you didn't have to play Braum every single game, you no longer had Targon's Brace, max HP, and Kog'Maw remained the best AD carry in the game. I think the player base, by and large, overrates the impact of metagame factors into champion viability. I think it's actually such a small fraction of how the actual game plays out that, again, pro players might say, ooh, you know, with Targon's Brace, I no longer died at Kha'Zix and all in. But I just think Kog'Maw is just good, right? And obviously the case here. And so again, the fact that his win rate didn't go anywhere when double Relic Shield disappeared from bot lane means that this is the most egregious example of that, right? This is Kog'Maw in the safest bot lane metagame to the, okay, now it's gone, and nothing changed. So just for the future, let's all stop quoting the metagame for why things are good and bad, because for solo queue, there is no impact. There really isn't. Okay, let's go to the damage output nerf. It's pretty big. So Kog'Maw, what I did here is I looked at his base attack speed, like his attack speed per level, you know, the general scaling. Actually, attack speed doesn't matter, so we're going to forget that at all. But his base attack damage and the attack damage growth. I looked at the most common skill order for his W, which, as you can see, puts rank 2 at level 4. And I chose his target to be himself. Now, that's the only part that's kind of not okay, because Kog'Maw has reasonably low max HP by level 18. Also, AD carries tend to be lower level than the average champion in the game, top, mid, jungle. And most champions in the game are going to have more health than Kog'Maw. So the actual impact of this nerf is going to go up, based on numbers here, because he actually will be hitting higher health targets than I'm listing in this chart. But I always do they attack themselves. I think it's a fair way to go about things, so that's what I chose here. Of course, also worth pointing out is Kog'Maw tends to actually build real attack damage and real items, so the nerf softens somewhat. As you can still see here, it's a pretty meaningful nerf. There's a few things I want to unpack, because with this nerf, Kog'Maw has less free damage on the kit, right? Instead of doing 7% of someone's max health, he's doing 5% of someone's max health, which is obviously a nerf of about 28 and change percent. 28.6, I think it is. So the W damage output got nerfed by 28%. Now, obviously, he's still auto-attacking. He still has his Q attack speed buff. He still has his R damage. But it probably is going to change what builds he's incentivized to go for, because a lot of the current builds were like Rage Blade, Wit's End, Blade of the Ruin King. Some people could actually max Q second, and you go for super high attack speed builds, which, hey, makes sense. You've got a really, really powerful W. But if W's damage, your main steroid, is down by 28.6%, do you really want a Wit's End anymore? And potentially, do you even want a Rage Blade anymore? And the answer might be no. And so there's a really decent chance that Kog'Maw will dip really hard in win rate, and then he'll gain a little bit as people build better items. Like, there's a decent chance, and I don't know, but there's a decent chance that Wit's End is no longer a viable second item because the magic damage output is just not high enough to be worth it. That he should just build a Hurricane, or build a Blade of the Ruin King, or build towards Infinity Edge or Essence Reaver a little bit sooner, and build more real damage items. What this also means, with his damage being cut down heavily, is he is less allowed to build tank. In China, Randuin's Omen is a core item on Kog'Maw, because you build a Randuin's Omen and then just duel the opposing AD carry. You have a bunch of armor, you have a bunch of attack speed slows, you have crit reduction, so you can't die to the Caitlyn, and you just kill her with W on. Kog'Maw in high-level play is seeing a lot of tank builds come out, whether it's Frozen Mallet, Randuin's Omen, Wit's End into Scimitar, like all this kind of stuff. And I'm very happy that his free damage is going down, so he can't just build quasi-tank and be a high-damage AD carry. I think it's a very, very good idea to nerf in this way. It's a big nerf, but he's a 54% win rate champion and the number 1 pick in pro play. I don't think Kog'Maw is going to be in the dumpster. I don't even think he's going to dip below 50% win rate. I'm pretty sure Kog'Maw is still going to be above 50. Excuse me. I think he'll be viable in solo queue. I think he will probably... I think pros will overreact and he'll disappear from pro. I think they'll jump onto they'll jump onto Tristana 100%. I think Tristana is going to be a huge pick in pro play next patch, but there's that. All right, let's move forward. Lucian. Oh, Lucian. Lucian. Every AD carry main ever loves to complain about Lucian, and there's a lot of things I want to unpack for context. So first, I'll tell you stats. He's been played exactly once in pro play in mid lane, as of when I looked at stats last week. He is a 45% win rate bot laner in high elo, 47% win rate bot laner in mid elo. In mid lane, he is a 42% win rate mid laner in high elo, and a 44% mid laner in moderate elo. What's funny is these stats have been consistent for a very long time. Lucian has literally always had a higher bot lane win rate than mid lane win rate in solo queue forever. This includes all of 2017, where he became a mid laner when Xiaohu showed up and said, no, we're going to play this champion now. And Lucian was like a reasonably common mid laner at Worlds at a 45% solo queue win rate. So what's also worth pointing out is when Lucian was 100% pick ban in pro play, in bot lane, he was a 47% win rate bot laner. So what's weird is Lucian's solo queue to pro play performance has always been sub 50, but played a lot. But now in a world where he's not played pro anymore, and now the complaining has kind of risen up. But even still, he's still always been a better bot laner in solo queue. Either way, they're going to get some changes. Okay, so Light Slinger's second shot damage is basically starting higher but ending at the same mark. And if you crit, I want to explain this mechanic, by the way. So when Lucian shoots, right, bang, bang through the passive, if you hit a minion, it's just 1x, 1x. You just do double damage, whatever, you move on. If you're hitting a champion, and I think it's only champions and turrets, I don't think it counts monsters. You hit a champion, the first shot does full damage as normal, and the second shot does 40, 50, 60, or 50, 55, 60% as much damage, so 1.6x. Additionally, there is a nerf on the crit damage of the second shot. Not only does the second shot deal half damage, it also used to only gain 50% bonus damage from crit, meaning a regular crit does 2x, and a 50% damage crit does 0.75x, right? I crit you for 1 doubled, I crit you for 0.5 multiplied by 1.5, which is 0.75. This has been loosened up to a 1.75 instead of a 1.2, and this still multiplies against Infinity Edge appropriately. Explaining that properly, here's the numbers. Here's the passive damage, and you can see the breakpoints are at level 13 and level 7. That's when those numbers turn. And the goal of these changes, by the way, has been to make him a better bot lane without buffing the mid lane. It seems as though Riot's well aware that his mid lane win rate can be 45%, and pros will still play him mid lane. So they're just gonna let that be a low win rate champion so it doesn't take over pro play, which honestly, with that context, or assumed context, I didn't ask, that makes a lot of sense. I think Lucian should probably remain well below 50% win rate in mid lane and solo queue, because he's going to be pro viable without much. He even already got played once, so he's going to be pro viable without much. But by buffing the lower level values, you help dual lane Lucian, because dual lane Lucian is under level 13 for a lot longer than mid lane Lucian. So that's a really cool thing. His damage is up by 25 or 10%, which is definitely meaningful. The second shot, going to do more damage. Now, again, in the real world, you would, of course, land your basics attack as well. So it really goes from doing 1.4 to 1.5, and then 1.5 to 1.55. So, like, the real world difference is a bit lower, but I'm including just the second shot here. What's also nice is the crit damage difference, though, and this is quite nice. Now, I'm only including a non-infinity edge crit. If you did choose to go IE on Lucian, this changes a bit more, but I didn't include that table. It's not that important, really. But what you can see here is counting his old damage buff, right, the 0.5 becoming 0.6, etc., whatever, and then pulling this in as well, crits are doing a lot more damage, right? Before, you did, you did 0.4x as much damage, then crit for 1.5, and it was 60% of your total attack damage, right? I mean, your second shot crit for 60% total AD, now it crits for 88% total AD. I think it's actually 87.5, but close enough. At level 7, instead of critting for 75% total AD, it crits for 96% total AD. That's pretty solid. And then actually at level 13 and higher, your crits on your second shot actually deals more than your full basic attack damage. So as you can see here, these are definitely meaningful upticks in damage output, and this will definitely buff crit Lucian. One other thing I want to add for context is in the mid lane, Blade of the Ruined King Black Cleaver builds are substantially stronger than crit builds for Lucian. The exact mechanics of which I explained in a Reddit post a while ago, at least my take on them, but essentially, non-crit Lucian is definitely stronger in mid lane. In bot lane, Ruined King Cleaver performs about as well as crit Lucian. What this means is bot lane Lucian is going to go back to crit builds. I think he's not going to go lethality. I don't expect that to be his build. And crit Lucian will definitely be stronger than Ruined King Lucian. Excuse me. I think there is no way you could argue otherwise, because right now they're equivalent, and an 8-3 crit is going to clearly be better. So crit Lucian is crit Lucian is a bit weak, but as good as the other Lucian builds. Crit Lucian will be the best Lucian build. I assume because of what these changes look like, most people will play crit Lucian in the bot lane, so it's not like he's going to have like this extra long tail of gaining win rate as people like learn the build. The build is pretty obvious, but I just wanted to call that out here. So cool, buffs to Lucian, that feels quite nice. Next up, Master Yi. So Master Yi is an interesting scenario because, of course, he's a jungler. And he is really bad in high elo and completely fine for mid ratings. He's at 49 to 50% in mid rating. And probably even higher than that in low rating. I didn't check specifically for like what below silver looks like for him. So Master Yi is, I guess, technically a bit weak. That's fine. But what's weird is the kind of buffs they chose. So they buffed the mana cost of Alpha Strike, and they buffed the base damage very slightly and the ratio by a little bit on Yi's active Wuju style. So the Alpha Strike mana changes we have right here. And what I found interesting is typically mana costs, especially prohibitive mana costs, test skills. What I mean to say is better players are better at dealing with high mana costs than worse players, because better players tend to keep track of their mana pool a bit better, don't get surprised by the fact that they can't cast Q anymore, and generally speaking, I would argue that a mana cost buff is less helpful for high-rated players than for lower-rated players. But Master Yi is in a situation where he's doing worse for high-rated players than he is lower-rated players, which is a buff that, in my opinion, disproportionately helps the spot where he's already pretty good. Next up is his E active, and what I chose to do here is include his normal basic attack damage and then include the E active on top of this one. Obviously, the base damage difference is not very much. It's only 4 attack damage apart in the very early game. 4, 3, 2, 1 based on rank, and then 0 at rank 5 is the same base damage. But because he has 10% bonus AD through his E passive, the bonus ratio going from 0.25 to 0.35 technically does influence slightly. What I also included in this ratio increase here is I said, well, if you're going to buy another 100 attack damage, your basic attacks do another 100 AD, and if they're doing 125 with the E, it's 135 with the E, right? So it's an 8% increase in the total damage of the attack. Now, in the real world, it's slightly better than that because as my brain functions, I'll get there eventually. In the real world, it's a bit better than that because you have things like Rage Blade affecting Wuju style, but not as basic attack damage. That's the primary one, basically. That's the only one that really matters. Oh, and also true damage doesn't get affected by armor, while physical damage does. So it is, in the real world, actually better than 8% ratio increase, but that's more accurate than just simply comparing 35 to 25, in my opinion. Ultimately, I am concerned these are the wrong buffs for Master Yi, though. I think if you're below gold, actually, heck, if you're gold or lower, I think Master Yi is going to be strong. I think he was already viable, but I think he's now strong in mid and lower ratings. And I think Master Yi is probably still weak, I would guess, in high rated play. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe properly managing his E is actually a very important skill, and now that it's a bit stronger, it's going to mean more. Maybe that's actually the case, and I'm misrepresenting it, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. Next up, Rise can no longer activate Stopwatch Azonias during his ultimate. It will act as though they have been interrupted by crowd control. What's interesting is I read on Reddit via a Rioter, who I trust to know what he's talking about, said that Bard Ultimate would not stop Rise. Like, that Stasis doesn't count as hard CC. It's specifically only Hourglass that does this, and Stopwatch. So first of all, I am glad this is happening, by the way, because freaking screw Rise in pro play. He is, okay, what's weird is I wrote down that Azir was number 1, then I also wrote down Rise is number 1. Oh, actually, I think they were tied when I looked up stats. Azir and Rise were tied as the most picked and banned mid laners in pro play at 89%, so I am glad he's getting nerfed. That's a good thing. Thing is, Rise is hot garbage in solo queue. He is sub 45%. It's 43 when I look at the numbers. That is nuts low. That is stupid low. Rise seems like he will at some point need a gameplay update to make him not as dumb in pro play versus solo queue. That said, Ult Zhonya's is a more important interaction in pro than solo queue. So I think this is, not only is it a good nerf because I hate the Zhonya's Rise ult interaction, it's just very, very frustrating, but also because pro play is so low kill, it's so much less active than solo queue. Basically, ult Zhonya's is always up for Rise in pro play and not always up for Rise in solo queue. So this is a disproportionately more affecting pro play nerf, which I am very happy about. And it means that we can lower Rise down and then buff him as a champion and make this number 1 in pro play hot garbage solo queue, number 1 in pro play warm garbage in solo queue. And that'll help a little bit. So being warm garbage is less bad than hot garbage, I'm pretty sure. So great. Good. I think absolutely Rise is still a pick to watch in pro, though. And he's still going to be hot garbage in solo queue. I don't think anyone's surprised by that at all. Next up, pretty substantial nerfs 4 seconds at rank 1 to Sejuani's Q cooldown. Much like Jarvan, Sejuani is an incredibly high-tier pro pick in the jungle. She is 85% pro presence. It's really, really high. She's also above 50% win rate in both high and mid-elo solo queue. So, I mean, definitely on all accounts strong, exceptionally so in pro, but still very strong in general play. Fully support nerfing her. And I do actually like the idea of nerfing the basic Q cooldown, because before it was a 13 to 11 second scale. Now that it's 17 to 11, there's a meaningful reason to actually put points into your Q. Right now, she definitely maxes W first and E second. E has a stun rank up. And there's probably a meaningful consideration now between a 0.1 second stun and a 1.5 second off your Q cooldown. That's actually pretty meaningful. So if you, of course, don't choose to change your build order, then you have a 4 second longer Q, which is pretty meaningful. And if you do choose to change, you're going to miss out on, as my brain starts to function, you will miss out on some stun duration. Yeah, so as far as what's going to mean for her gameplay, it'll make invades less safe because her Q won't be up again to get out. Her overall map mobility is down. You know, it just, she will be more catch outable because that Q is going to be down more often, and so she'll die a bit more. I don't know if it's going to affect her jungle pathing. I don't play enough Sedge jungle to know if there's like a lot of times where Q just comes up and you get over the red wall and now you're doing a camp a little bit faster. There probably are situations where that's going to happen, and so there's going to be some elements of this being a meaningful change. By and large, though, she will probably stay very close to 50% win rate in solo queue, and she will almost definitely still be a totally pickable pro play jungler. I don't see her disappearing off these nerfs. They're not big enough. Next up is Tryndamere. Oh, baby. Tryndamere obviously does not show up in pro play at all, but also is not doing particularly well in solo queue. Just, it seems like we're just buffing a lot of the like melee auto attackers right now. That's kind of cool. He's basically 49% win rate in both high and mid tier. So he's not like he's pub stomping at all. So minor buffs feel good. Really do like that they're just buffing base AD. I love base stats as a concept and having them be meaningful. Like, there's a lot of base stats I want to be the same so that you don't like randomly and magically just become better than another champion because your stats are higher. But if it fits the profile of your champion, I love when base stats differ meaningfully. And so here we have the table of Tryndamere's base attack damage. Now, by the way, I am counting Bloodlust here. Most frequently, Tryndamere maxes Q first, and at full HP, it gives 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 attack damage. So I'm counting the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 attack damage in this table in both cases. Even still, right, in the very minimum, it still means that Tryndamere has 157 attack damage at level 18, which is a really meaningful amount of attack damage. That's like the amount of AD I want from a melee auto attacker. That feels fair and appropriate to me. That's the number I want to see. Darius gets around there. A lot of these Juggernauts get around there. I think that's a really solid number to be at. Before it was 123. Now it's basically 132. Plus 25. And that starts getting in the camp where I'm like, yeah, that feels like a pretty good attack damage mark for Tryndamere. Unintentional pun. Ultimately, it's only like a 3 to 6% attack damage increase. I mean, obviously even lower in the early game. It's not huge, but it's enough that it can matter. This by itself would be buff to the champion, so that's cool. You gained up to about 0.5 AD per level. That's kind of nice to see. Next up, the bonus AD ratio on Spinning Slash. Yep, it's a more than 1x bonus AD ratio. Gets up quite a bit. Once again, I counted Bloodlust in here, which again adds 5 to 25 attack damage. Or that could be double, by the way, if he's at 1 HP, so it could be 10 to 50. I didn't include that part, but it could. So in the real world, this is actually a bigger base bump because you're not at full health all the time, but I chose to just use full HP as the marker. So it gains up to 3 damage, whatever, right, when he's at full health. It's not huge, but ultimately going from a 1.2 to 1.3 ratio is an 8% bump in the ratio. So the Spinning Slash, as you scale into perpetuity, going to do about 8% more damage, and later into the game. So great, that's cool. Ultimately, I think this will make Tryndamere, I think he'll probably get really close to, I'm not sure if he's going to pass 50% win rate. These buffs aren't that big. I mean, these just aren't very big. So they're very just small buffs that Tryndamere is going to be a little bit more likely to be seen in solo queue and whatnot. What I also think is interesting is back in the day, Tryndamere, like I'm talking season 4, Tryndamere was a Jace counter pick. Because you could basically auto push, you could heal through all his poke, and then you could tower dive him. And because Jace doesn't have true disengage tools, you would walk up to him, smack, 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 he'd knock you backwards, you'd spin back in, smack, 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 pop ultimate, Jace dies. If he flashes, you flash, everyone moves on. Tryndamere used to be, back in the day, a Jace counter pick. Now, Jace is not a frequently blind-picked top laner. He's typically counter-picked into things like Gnar. But if we start seeing Jace blind picks, there is an outside chance someone decides to play Tryndamere. That chance is very, very low, but I want to see it happen. Next up, Victor buffs. Victor is a champion. He's a cool bro. Super duper duper weak. Well, okay, not as insanely weak as people make it out to. There's a lot of Victor mains like whining. I don't want to say whining. I don't want to be too pejorative about this. Clamoring hard for Victor buffs. What's funny is Victor, much like before. So right now, by the way, it's like Victor is not in pro play at all. He's a 46% win rate high elo champion, 48% win rate mid elo champion. Right? He's not winning games very frequently. But even when Victor was pretty common in pro play, he was still sub 50. Victor seems like another champion that pros decided to adopt and say, yep, he's our guy. We're going to play him. Doesn't matter, he's not good in solo queue. Trust me, I know this. Maybe they're right. Maybe there's something about him that is not getting counted for in solo queue, such as like with Azir and being experienced as the champion. But anyway, Victor definitely is weak, so he's getting buffs. His Q augment is going to increase the Q shield by 60%, and his ultimate is going to gain a 10 and 20 second cooldown at ranks 2 and 3. These are pretty small buffs because 8.3 is an odd patch, and they're smaller patches. There's not a lot of big groundbreaking changes except for probably Kog'Maw. And this is just a quick table of an example of how big the shield could be. Victor's Q shield has a mana ratio and an AP ratio. Based on what I read, and I'm not a big Victor player, but I'm pretty certain there is no base value. It's just percent mana, percent AP. This table is just a rank or a Mark III or a perfect hex core and his base stats. There's no runes, there's no other items, there's no other buffs, there's no infernal dregs, nothing else included. It's just the Mark III hex core. So in the real world, these numbers are higher. Obviously, 6% is 6% all the time. This isn't changing, and we all know this. But basically, with a similar build, it's 6% higher. But this is like how big his shield is in the barest of scenarios. Just base stats, just a hex core. And so obviously this shield gets quite a bit bigger as you buy more and more items, but I just wanted to kind of show like what this shield size really is. And it's honestly pretty meaningful for an ability that already deals damage, grants you a movement speed haste, and then deals more damage. And it's actually a pretty meaningful shield by like just being level 18 without anything at all other than like the very basic items. It's still a meaningful shield. So just kind of want to spell out how big that shield was. Chaos Storm cooldown, kind of nice as well. Ups his late game, which is, you know, I guess meaningful. I didn't feel like there were scenarios where Victor's ultimate was down when you needed it in team fights, but I don't know, maybe it helps him duel a bit more in the side lane, pop his ulti for like to chunk someone out, and then it's up next time again. But either way, whatever. Definitely a meaningful change in the cooldown. Good for Victor. This is definitely, I think, enough to make people look at Victor again in pro play, with Azir going down in power, with Ryze going down in power. I think both will still be viable in pro, but maybe some mid laners will look at Victor once again, try him out in scrims, try him out in solo queue, say, yeah, it feels pretty good. Who knows? I know there's a lot of people trying to figure out if they can really make Q work. I actually know there's a high elo Ryze player who is playing more or less tank Ryze. I don't remember the exact build, but it's basically like full hex core with like Iceborne Gauntlet and like some other random stuff like that. Like there's a Void Staff in there for Magic Pen. And if your Q shield is just really, really big and scales with mana and AP, which are pretty easy to get for tank builds, you can have a lot of low cooldown, high shield Qs, and you play Bruiser Victor. There is a non-zero chance the best Victor build becomes Bruiser Victor. And he goes hybrid. Like he gets Abyssal Mask and Iceborne Gauntlet and a Rod of, well, not Rod of Ages because you have Abyssal Mask, but like if that's the build, right? Then that's the build. And I don't think that's a problem because the kit is literally built around him being a mid-ranged Q spamming, like, I'm going to auto-attack you mage. Like, that lines up with expectation, honestly, at a certain point. I'm okay with Victor's best build being Bruiser. So, that's just my 2 cents. We'll see how it goes. Next up, everyone's most hated champion, it's Zoe! Hey, it's Zoe! All right. Zoe finally did break 50% win rate in solo queue. In high elo, she's above 51%. Still sub 50 if you're like below plat, by the way. Still sub 50 if you're in the middle 60, 80, whatever percent. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you're not high elo, Zoe's like, I understand she's annoying, but she's still not winning games. If you're gold 2, Zoe's not winning games in your games. She's not. Trust me, she's not. She's still losing whether she's winning. People are getting better at her, okay, and that'll change over time, but she's still not winning games. As much as the champions, you can just play something else that does win games, like Malzahar. But yeah, Zoe is definitely strong. So she is the number 3 mid laner pick globally behind Azir and Ryze. So her stock is plenty high. Obviously, with Malzahar getting nerfed in 8.2, Malzahar's off the pick and ban table, so Zoe's getting more and more frequently picked and banned. Well, banned mostly. So you're still getting a lot of that going on. Yeah, deserving of nerfs, totally for sure. On board, Zoe deserves nerfs. Totally agree. The comments I saw about Zoe are, LOL, WTF, this is not a real nerf. I don't completely agree. This is not a real nerf, because you can joke and say, oh, it's only a 0.25 second difference in the cooldown, but that's a bit unfair because it's a much larger nerf than that every time before that. It's 1 second, half a second, 3/4 of a second, half a second, quarter second. This was nonlinear scaling before, by the way, if you didn't know. The first 8 levels matter. The first 8 levels, the landing phase, matter. How much can Zoe split push or wave clear? Much less. How much could you poke me? Much less. How much could you follow up off her E? Much less. This does have a meaningful difference in her early landing phase pattern. The 0.25, really, really minor. But what I do want to break down is when it could matter. As we look at this table of percentage nerf in cooldown, I want to point out the most annoying thing about Zoe and why I think a cooldown nerf on Q is a good idea. In terms of finding ways to remove Zoe frustration, I think a cooldown nerf is a good way of going about it. Why is that? Because Zoe has the very annoying aspect of getting to spam Q on cooldown. And then whenever she feels like, regardless of whatever her Q cooldown is, will then press E. And if she lands asleep, invariably, Q will be back up from cooldown. She hits it again and tags you with the missile. And the more rank 5's cooldown goes up, the more there's a chance that Q is not up in time for when sleep hits. And especially consider the fact that this window is now growing, if you pick up Merc Treads as her lane opponent, because she's a hard CC champion, you probably should, you can further shrink the window where she can put you to sleep and have her Q back up. That is, in my opinion, probably the most annoying thing about Zoe is just how easily she can spam Q and then still have it up for her combo. With a combination of this nerf and you buying Merc Treads, it is less likely. It is still possible. She can totally still do it. There's nothing to change her base damage. There's nothing to change her burst. There's nothing to change her CC. There's nothing to change her mobility and her other actives. Totally understand that. She's probably still strong. But I think it does begin to approach probably the next most annoying thing about the champion, which is it doesn't matter what kind of Qs I'm casting, it will be up by the time I sleep you. And that is a meaningful change. Maybe this should become eventually 7 seconds. I'm not sure, but that's what I feel about it. None of the numbers are really included here, but basically a bunch of champions are having their base HP 5 stat changed by up to 0.25, which is not a meaningful number at all. Don't worry about it. It's 0.05 health per second at the most. But yay for hashtag clean numbers. I love clean numbers. It makes it easy to do all of my stuff when I'm, looking up champions and typing things into Google Sheets. Great. Ability updates to Shogath. Sweet. Just visual, but dang, this looks way the hell cooler than the other crap. This is so much better looking than his other Scream. Oh my gosh, this is so much cooler. And even the particle lines up with the actual size of the ability. Isn't this nice? Q looks pretty sick as well. Look at that. That's super dank. Good for that. I'm glad that change is happening. All right. More changes to the game, though. Unsealed Spellbook nerf from 25 to 15%. I would like this to go lower, personally. What's interesting is Unsealed Spellbook is still not a very winning keystone in solo queue. That's fine, because I don't think Spellbook is ever really going to be that great in solo queue, just in most of its use cases. But definitely, if Spellbook is supposed to be a good keystone, it being good because of Summoner CDR is not a good thing. I would like this to go lower, personally. I think I said that already. It should be good because you are changing things around. Can go TP, then switch to Ghost, then do fun things like that. There's even a chance that Spellbook is not good for the game, and that being able to TP back to your lane in the early game is just not okay, and it breaks things. But I don't know how much I agree with that completely. I think there's ways around it because you can have keystones that do real things in game, but I'm glad that the boring part of the keystone is going down. In fact, it's a theme of all these inspiration changes, because next up they're moving magical footwear, free boots, into perfect timing. So now Hex Flash, free boots, and stopwatch are all in the same tier, which means Rip no one's going to buy Hex Flash ever again, because there's no way you probably skip one of these two if you go inspiration at all. But it's nice that they nerfed these runes a little bit. They nerfed the 50 free gold for upgrading magical footwear. That's quite nice. And they nerfed nerfed by 50 free gold what perfect timing's upgrade is worth. What I also really, really like is they nerfed the free gold for just selling the broken stopwatch after using it. This I like a lot, because now because I think the stopwatch in and of itself is a powerful active. And I think it being a powerful active and 120 gold was probably just too good. Being a powerful active and 120 gold for every champion in the game, kind of nutty, kind of broken. I'm glad that's going down to 20 gold. That's a great thing. I really do like that a lot. The boots I didn't really care about, whatever. I think it's still a strong rune. That's fine. But now you're much more likely to make the choice that, okay, well, look, what would I rather have? If I'm going to be buying Zhonya's second item, like say I'm playing Twisted Fate or something, and I might be buying a pretty early Zhonya's, it's like, well, I can save 250 here, plus get an early Zonia's active, or I can save 300 plus get 10 free move speed. And it's not only, and what's funny is it's not save 300 gold and get 10 free move speed. It's save 300 gold, get 10 free move speed, but aren't allowed to buy boots or get that 300 free gold until 10 minutes into the game. So this is definitely, I think, a meaningful nerf to magical footwear. I think it's a meaningful nerf to perfect timing. I am glad, by the way, that the way in which these runes are good is not free gold, because this is free gold. Right? These are the free gold runes. I'm glad that that's where the free gold is, because that actually makes the most sense. But these are clever, right? Like now, yes, you want to build towards Zonies that has this still, but so good. Glad it's happening. Ultimately, what I think it's going to happen to the game as a result, as we look over, by the way, and these just simply moved around, basically went down to here. I think we definitely see less inspiration secondary. I know I saw a couple of analysts say, ooh, but now we're just going to go stopwatch plus biscuits. Now I'm going to be super safe with stopwatch biscuits, but I don't agree. Not completely, because before, biscuits fought free boots, right? Biscuits moved, free boots moved. They swapped places. Before, people weren't going stopwatch biscuits. They were going stopwatch boots. Or, potentially, they were going boots dematerializer. Or, sorry, stopwatch dematerializer. My brain went backwards, sorry. So they can, of course, still go stopwatch dematerializer. That's not changing for mid lane, other than the extra 100 free gold loss, which is definitely a meaningful amount of gold. But if most people were doing stopwatch boots, that means they would rather get boots than biscuit delivery. Which means stopwatch biscuits should be weaker than stopwatch boots, because they weren't trying to do it anyway. Plus the 100 gold nerf, I think we're going to see less stopwatches in pro play. We're going to see less of it in solo queue. It is objectively weaker. Great. But if you really want it for the hourglass effect, you've got it, and that's cool. And I think it's still in a spot where it's viable. Let's move on. That was unorganized, and I apologize. Scoreboard updates. You have vision score on the trinket slot. That's kind of cool. We'll try to look at that when I play some games. Minor changes to give stats more breathing room for comparison. That's kind of cool. And then the mirrored mode update, I didn't like it when I first saw it. I never actually did play with the updated mirror mode. I play on mirrored mode in the scoreboard. But the goal is that you can make things more easily comparable. It'll probably be some learning for me and learning for you who play with mirrored scoreboard. There's probably going to be a thread about it on day one on Reddit about how ugly it looks or something. Maybe not, I don't know. But I do trust the people who made the change, and hopefully it'll look good in the end of the day. Hide preset pages actually works now in Champ Select. It was listed last patch, but now it's in. Keystones and end of game screen, that's pretty sweet. Still waiting for Keystones to be in Spectator natively, but one day. This is kind of nice as well. When you switch primary, it keeps your secondary runes, which is cool. So that's a little nice thing, which I really enjoy. And more animations, which is always fun. I like pretty things. So pretty things are nice. Hunt of the Blood Moon coming up pretty soon. As of this video, it's in like 2 days. That's pretty sweet. 20 champions. 10 free, 10 if you own them. Some small bug fixes. No zombie wards and killing a trap. That's nice. Go to items to tell you how much they've created. That's good. Even after you complete the quest, that's really nice to see. Callisto won't fail her jumps, which is good as often. Or, well, she could occasionally fail jumps now. She probably shouldn't. So that's a really good thing. And then the rest of these are really, really, really minor, so it doesn't really matter anymore. Apparently, Q kind of for ultimate hat, which is kind of awkward, but whatever, doesn't anymore. Some sweet looking skins. Big Boy Nasus. Big Boy Warwick. Zion Recon Sweetheart. And cool Lux skin. Sweet. And some chromos for all these guys. And some emotes. And some more emotes. Sweet. That's going to do it for the video. That pretty much covers everything that was going to be happening here. Even though I meant to bullet point all of my thoughts, I did not do a single bit of reading. I read through the win rate data and the pick ban data, and I didn't do any of my bullet points, so I'm still ad-libbing, and that means I ran really long, even though it was a very short patch. Shame on me. I'm a bad person. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.